welcome to Rathfarnham Castle. It has a very long and illustrious history, so I'm not going to give you the whole history because it would take all day, but I'm going to talk about some of the important points in the history and point out some of the interesting things you can see as you visit. The best place to start is with the person who built Rathfarnham Castle, or had it built for him, I should say. His name was Adam Loftus. Adam Loftus was from Yorkshire originally, and he came to Ireland and was appointed as Lord Chancellor, and he was also Archbishop of Dublin. And Adam Loftus had this castle built for himself. It's really a fortified house. And at the time, I suppose, he regarded this part of Dublin as being a little bit lawless, very close to the Dublin and Wicklow mountains. He was rather afraid of the O'Byrnes and O'Tooles of Wicklow, and so he built this house to be defended. Now, when the guests came into the entrance hall of the castle, they would have really been given first impressions immediately by these relief busts, which you see all around the wall. If we look over here first, we've got Socrates here, we have Michelangelo, we have Dante. Now, these would have been placed here really to give a good impression of the family. It shows immediately that they are learned, that they are well-travelled, that they know about the arts, that they're interested in philosophy, history, literature. So straight away you're getting some sort of impression of the family who lived here. We're in what was the dining room of the 18th century house, and you might be a little bit surprised at the appearance of this room, but in fact you can tell the entire history of this castle in this room alone, and the way in which the walls have been exposed, the lining paper, the brickwork gives us a clue as to how this room developed and evolved over the years. The rocking horse seems very oversized and can cause a bit of consternation, but again the reason for this is practical, because the rocking horse was actually to teach children how to ride, so it wasn't just a plaything, it was something which had a very practical use. And of course young aristocratic children would have all learned how to ride, and this was a good introduction. When they were in the nursery they got used to the movement of the horse and also the height, being up high, so that they wouldn't be afraid when they graduated to the real thing. So now we've come into the ballroom, which would have been one of the most important rooms in the house. This room was designed by William Chambers, so again it has a beautiful ceiling, and down at the end of the room we have a collection, little family if you like. And the lady is wearing a court dress, and as you can see it's sewn with metallic thread. The gentleman's suit is made of a very shiny material as well. So these really were worn at a ball or other such occasion. If you look at the chandeliers here, and remember that original chandeliers would have had candlelight, these kind of clothes were designed to reflect the light. So when the lady went out onto the ballroom floor, she would have been spotted because the lights from the chandeliers would have caught on the dress, and it would have kind of added to her, I suppose, appearance. And the gentleman's suit was the same. So some thought would have gone into the type of materials they used to have their clothes made up. This room and the next room are part of, they're a suite of rooms really designed by Sir William Chambers, and architecturally they're probably two of the most important rooms in the house. They're really state rooms, and so the family kept these rooms prepared in case royalty came to stay. They were like the good bedroom, the best bedroom, but in fact they would have used them in between expected visits as little boudoirs, breakfast rooms, dining rooms, drawing rooms. They were kind of multi-purpose, but they were state rooms, and so if royalty did come to visit, these would have been the rooms that would have been used. Now, before we move on, it's probably worth looking at this lady here in her beautiful 18th century dress, but I suppose what's worth noting also is her hair. High hair was very fashionable in the 18th century, and it was a kind of status symbol, and it's where the expression bigwigs came from. And they built the wigs up over these incredible frames of horsehair and wire and padding. and they would have the wigs decorated then if they were going to the ball or to some other occasion. It would be decorated with ostrich feathers, as you see here, diamonds, ribbons, jewels of all sorts, and even little ships in sail and windmills with sails that moved. They could be quite dangerous, because if you were going into a room where there were a lot of chandeliers, your hair could catch fire, which happened. And of course these wigs were very heavily pomaded with some kind of animal fat, so they really were flammable. They would sleep in these wigs because it took so long to assemble them. So the ladies would leave them on for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. They slept with their heads on kind of wooden blocks so as not to muss up the hair, and then after a couple of weeks they would send the wigs out to the hairdressers. You didn't have to go to the hairdresser yourself, you sent the wig out. Gentlemen wore wigs as well, but they were never as ornate. And great ladies and gentlemen all wore makeup. All the wealthy aristocratic men and women wore makeup. It was partly fashion, but it was also for practical reasons, because in the 18th century many people succumbed to smallpox. The poorer people usually died or were left with terrible scarring. Lots of wealthier people survived, but they too were left with scars, and so they covered over the scars with this heavy white makeup, and also the little beauty spots. The little beauty spots are made of velvet or silk, and so they were used to cover up scars, but also very importantly there was a language of the beauty spot, so you could place it on whatever part of your face would indicate that you were married or single or looking. So there was a whole sort of other language going on there that worked in combination with the language of the fan. So this is the last room of the tour. This is the Gilt Room, and it's one of the 2 rooms in the suite designed by James Athenian Stewart, and it's called the Gilt Room for obvious reasons. If you look up at the ceiling, you'll see that it is highly decorated with gilt. This ceiling has not been restored, so this is the original gilding, and you have to imagine what that would have looked like when the room was first decorated. In this manner, the gilding would have still been so bright and shiny, and imagine it by candlelight, it would have been absolutely stunning. While it was certainly one of the sort of state rooms designed by Stewart, it had practical uses if the ball was on, because just through there's a little passageway that actually goes right through into the ballroom. So if the young ladies had had enough of the ball, if their feet were hurting or their wigs were falling sideways, they needed to fix their makeup, they would come in here into this little room. It was a place of refuge for them from the dancing. And so this is, it's quite an early 19th century dress really. It's from around 1820. And it's kind of, you know, the real typical kind of Victorian dress with a tiny waist and the big skirt. But what is interesting about it is that rather than being embroidered, it's hand painted. So that's really a kind of a change, and it's a transitional period. So, I mean, it would have been a thing of great beauty and very expensive, hand-painted Chinese silk. It would have been a luxury item. But really what you're seeing there is the move from embroidered to painted, which is only a step away from printing. And then before too long, you're starting to get the printed cottons, and all of that eventually leads us to top shops and all the mass-produced clothes. So really it's kind of something transitional. And of course she's wearing a big bonnet, because of course all young ladies had to keep their complexions very pale, because if you allowed your skin to get in any way freckled or tanned, it showed that you were outside working and were therefore of lower stock. So young ladies had to keep their complexions completely and utterly blemish free, and so they obviously well, they understood the dangers of the sun probably more than we think of today.